Breath of the Wild's Hyrule returns in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, now featuring floating islands in the sky. That obvious change aside, there are quite a few differences between the two Hyrules we've noticed in the latest Tears of the Kingdom gameplay video. While we did a comparison showing them off side by side, it's time to get down to the nitty gritty and show you everything that's different in Hyrule this time around. Let's start with the HUD, which is quite similar, yet different. The minimap now displays latitude, longitude, and elevation, and the time of day and weather indicator is white instead of a glowing blue. Horse commands have also been changed from ya to go, and whoa to whoa. The D-pad indicators show shields on the left and swords on the right as usual, but the top shows an apple now instead of a rune ability. That's because this is now the resource quick menu, where you can select items to do things like fuse them to weapons. Which reminds me, there's a new spot on the HUD showing symbols that reflect the new abilities Link has, which are essentially new rune powers, although they're not called such. There's the Recall ability, Fuse, Ultra Hand, and Ascend. Now that we've gotten the new HUD out of the way, let's get to the beginning of the demo set in the Ash Swamp of West Necluda. When comparing it to the same area of Breath of the Wild, we notice right away there is no Sheikah Tower in the distance, this one being Hateno Tower. However, there is something on top of Mount Lanayru that appears to be glowing, and we see another one of these while Link rides through the swamp. And we don't know what these are yet. Bringing our attention back to the swamp though, it's a lot less cluttered than it was in Breath of the Wild, since the Guardian remains have been cleared. More than likely as a result of some Hyrule cleanup campaign, which was started by Hylian citizens after Calamity Ganon's defeat in Breath of the Wild. After all, he left quite a big mess behind 100 years ago. Unfortunately, a new mess took its place, in the form of gigantic rubble from the Sky Islands, and new enemies over here. These foes are called Constructs, and while Link doesn't fight them on the ground in this demo, he does take on some later in the Sky Islands. But again, we're focusing on what's new and missing on the ground, and one of the new elements is this Korok with a big ol' backpack saying, "I need to reach my friend." Looks like this will be the new way to get Korok seeds in the game, unless they give you something new this time. Now let's move on to this area around Dueling Peaks Stable, as a lot has changed. Not Beetle though, he's still there. The first big change is that the shrine has completely vanished. It doesn't even look like it was moved or demolished, it just disappeared, like the Sheikah Towers. Question is, did they go back into the ground after Calamity Ganon was slain, since they've served their purpose? Or maybe they did get demolished and cleaned up afterwards as part of the Hyrule cleanup campaign. Speaking of this theoretical campaign, it appears renovations are in order for the new Hyrule, as shown by this construction site with wooden planks. There's even another one near the East Post ruins, along with what looks like a stack of bricks. This raises the question, will these construction sites be interactive? There's already an in-depth crafting mode in Tears of the Kingdom, so maybe some of these quests will involve rebuilding Hyrule at these locations? Oh man, the thought of that is just way too exciting, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the smoke coming out of the stable directly from the horse's mouth. Is this just a new detail the developers decided to add, or is there a kitchen in there now? If only we could see inside. There's also a pink cloud off in the distance. I wonder what that's all about. Anyway, as the camera pans up to the Dueling Peaks, we see the green swirly object found in previous Tears of the Kingdom trailers, and we get a better look at it later once Link flies up to the sky. This obviously wasn't here in Breath of the Wild, along with the other pieces of rubble found around the Dueling Peaks from the Sky Islands above. And if the lighting looks different in this part of the mountain, that's because there's an island casting a massive shadow, which was not there in Breath of the Wild. Finally, at the end when Link gets knocked off the island, we see a lot more of Hyrule from above. And although it's not possible to get this high in Breath of the Wild, it's easy to see the differences from up here without having to compare new and old. Like these dark red pits, which sort of resemble Ganon's Malice. It also appears to be coming out of Death Mountain too, and that's no good. And of course, there's the floating Hyrule Castle, which seems to be the location of the final boss, yet again. As Link hits the water and makes a big splash, he winds up on the shores of East Post Ruins, where again, renovations seem to be in progress, and you can see the floating Hyrule Castle in the background. Also, it looks like the draw distance has been significantly improved in this sequel. Guess that's what happens when a Wii U version doesn't hold you back. So that was an in-depth comparison on everything that's different in Tears of the Kingdom's Hyrule when compared to Breath of the Wild. Of course, there's a lot more for us to explore, and you can be sure we'll do some additional comparing in the future.